On March 12, 2019, mourners gathered at Riverside Memorial Chapel to say goodbye to 52-year-old Jennifer Caroline Hayes. Her husband, Michael, stood at the front with their two teenage children, grief etched across their faces. But as the service began, a second family walked through the doors, a man named David Chen, with two children who looked strikingly similar in age. The chapel fell silent. Jennifer's secret had been buried for nearly 2 decades, carefully maintained through elaborate schedules, separate bank accounts, and meticulously crafted lies. But death has a way of exposing what life concealed. What unfolded that day would reveal a double life so intricate, so calculated, that neither family had suspected a thing. Chapter 1. The Double Life. Jennifer Caroline Hayes was a master architect of deception, though no one would have guessed it by looking at her. She appeared to be exactly what she seemed: a successful corporate consultant, impeccably dressed, always professional, with a warm smile that put clients at ease. Her colleagues knew her as dedicated and reliable. Her expertise in business operations took her across the country, managing projects that required weeks away from home. It was the perfect profession for someone living two entirely separate lives. Jennifer's journey into duplicity began in the spring of one. She was 29 years old, ambitious, and recently promoted to senior consultant at a multinational firm. Her career was thriving, but her personal life felt incomplete. She craved connection, stability, and family, yet something within her resisted the finality of choosing just one path forward. In Chicago, during a corporate conference, she met Michael Hayes. He was an architect with kind eyes and an easy laugh, someone who made her feel grounded. Their connection was immediate and intense. Michael represented everything Jennifer thought she wanted: stability, tradition, and a life rooted in one place. Within 6 months, they were engaged. By 2002, they were married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. A year later, their daughter Emma was born, followed by their son Lucas 2 years after that. But even as Jennifer built this life in Chicago, another opportunity emerged. Her consulting work frequently took her to San Francisco, where she managed long-term contracts with tech companies. The distance from Chicago provided a strange sense of freedom, a space where she could be someone slightly different. During one extended project in 3, she met David Chen at a networking event. David was a software engineer, creative and spontaneous in ways that contrasted sharply with Michael's measured approach. He represented possibility, adventure, and a life less conventional. What began as casual dinners evolved into something deeper. Jennifer found herself drawn to David in ways she hadn't anticipated. Rather than ending one relationship to pursue the other, she made a calculated decision that would define the next 18 years of her existence. She would keep both. The logistics were complex but manageable. Jennifer's consulting career provided the perfect framework for her deception. She established a pattern of alternating weeks between Chicago and San Francisco, explaining to Michael that her biggest client required constant on-site presence. To David, she presented herself as a consultant based in San Francisco whose work frequently demanded travel to the Midwest. Neither man questioned the arrangement. Her income was substantial, her explanations plausible, and her devotion during the time she spent with each family seemed absolute. By 5, Jennifer had married David in a quiet civil ceremony in San Francisco, telling him her family was estranged and she preferred an intimate affair. That same year, she gave birth to their son Ryan. 2 years later, their daughter Sophia arrived. Jennifer now had 4 children across 2 families, 2 husbands who knew nothing of each other, and 2 completely separate existences maintained through meticulous planning and unwavering discipline. She maintained separate phones, email accounts, and social media profiles. Her financial life was compartmentalized with precision. 2 bank accounts, 2 sets of tax returns filed under slightly different versions of her name, and careful documentation that ensured neither household raised questions about her income or expenses. She celebrated birthdays twice, attended parent-teacher conferences in different cities within days of each other, and created elaborate schedules that ensured she was present for crucial moments in all four children's lives. To her Chicago family, she was Jennifer Hayes, devoted wife and mother who traveled extensively for work but always returned home. To her San Francisco family, she was Jennifer Chen, equally devoted, equally present during her time with them. The exhaustion was constant, the pressure immense, but Jennifer had committed to this path. For 18 years, she sustained the impossible, convincing everyone around her that they knew the complete truth of who she was. They didn't. Chapter 2. The Facade Maintained. Maintaining two families for 18 years required more than simple lies. It demanded systematic organization, flawless execution, and an almost superhuman capacity for compartmentalization. Jennifer Hayes understood this from the beginning. She approached her double life with the same strategic precision she applied to corporate consulting projects, treating each family as a separate entity requiring dedicated resources, attention, and carefully managed expectations. The financial architecture of her deception was perhaps the most intricate element. Jennifer maintained two completely separate bank accounts, each linked to a different variation of her legal name. Her Chicago account operated under Jennifer C. Hayes, while her San Francisco account used Jennifer Caroline Chen. She filed taxes in both states, carefully allocating her consulting income to avoid triggering audits or raising questions. Her earnings were substantial enough to support both households comfortably, though she explained certain financial limitations to each family by citing business investments and retirement savings that existed only on paper. Credit cards were issued by different banks, each tied to the appropriate identity. She maintained separate medical insurance policies, explaining to Michael that her company offered better coverage through their California office, while telling David her Chicago client provided superior benefits. Every purchase, every transaction, every financial decision was made with deliberate awareness of which life it belonged to. The mental accounting required to maintain this system without error was exhausting, but Jennifer never faltered. Technology became both her greatest ally and her most dangerous threat. In the early years of her deception, before smartphones became ubiquitous, Jennifer relied on two separate cell phones, each labeled internally in her mind as belonging to one family or the other. She developed an almost instinctive awareness of which phone was ringing, which messages belonged to which life. As technology advanced, she adapted. She used encrypted messaging applications, cloud storage accounts under different email addresses, and location masking services that prevented either family from accidentally discovering her true whereabouts. Social media presented unique challenges. Jennifer created two distinct online personas, each carefully curated to reflect only one family. Her Chicago Facebook profile showed pictures of Emma and Lucas, vacation photos from Midwest destinations, and check-ins at restaurants near their suburban home. Her San Francisco Instagram account, operating under a slightly modified name, featured Ryan and Sophia, images from West Coast beaches, and references to the tech industry event she attended with David. She maintained strict privacy settings and never allowed the two profiles to intersect, blocking mutual acquaintances before they could notice similarities or make connections. Despite her meticulous planning, close calls were inevitable. There were moments when the carefully constructed walls nearly collapsed. During Emma's 14th birthday in Chicago, Jennifer received an emergency call that Ryan had been rushed to the hospital in San Francisco with suspected appendicitis. She sat through Emma's birthday dinner, smiling and present, while her mind raced with worry about her other son, 3,000 miles away. She managed the crisis remotely through text messages sent from the bathroom, coordinating with David and the medical staff, while maintaining the appearance of complete engagement with her Chicago family. Another near disaster occurred when a colleague from her consulting firm mentioned seeing Jennifer at a San Francisco restaurant with a man and two children. Jennifer's heart stopped, but she quickly explained it was a business dinner with a client and his family, a story the colleague accepted without question. She learned from these moments, adjusting her behavior, choosing more private locations, and becoming increasingly vigilant about potential overlap between her two worlds. The psychological toll was immense, though Jennifer rarely allowed herself to fully acknowledge it. She compartmentalized ruthlessly, training her mind to shift completely between identities depending on which family she was with. When she was with Michael, Emma, and Lucas, her San Francisco life ceased to exist in her conscious thoughts. When she was with David, Ryan, and Sophia, Chicago became a distant reality associated only with work obligations. This mental partitioning allowed her to be genuinely present with each family, to love both sets of children authentically, and to maintain emotional connections that felt real despite being built on foundations of systematic deception. Sleep became scarce. Jennifer often lay awake during the nights, mentally reviewing her calendar, ensuring no scheduling conflicts existed, rehearsing explanations for upcoming absences, and managing the constant anxiety that one mistake, one slip of the tongue, one forgotten detail could bring her entire fabricated world crashing down around her. For 18 years, she succeeded. The facade held strong, sustained by discipline, deception, and a woman's determination to have everything she wanted, regardless of the cost. Chapter 3. The Unraveling. March 10th, 2019, began as an ordinary Sunday for Jennifer Caroline Hayes. She had spent the weekend in Chicago with Michael, Emma, and Lucas, attending Lucas's basketball game and celebrating a quiet family dinner. Her calendar indicated she needed to return to San Francisco by Monday morning for what she told Michael was an urgent client meeting. In reality, it was Sophia's 11th birthday, and Jennifer had promised to be there for the celebration David had been planning for weeks. She left the Chicago house at 4 in the morning, as she often did, kissing Michael goodbye while he was still half asleep. The drive to O'Hare International Airport was familiar, a route she had traveled countless times over 18 years. But on this particular morning, as she merged onto Interstate 294, fatigue and the weight of her double life caught up with her in the most devastating way possible. Investigators later determined that Jennifer fell asleep at the wheel. Her vehicle drifted across 2 lanes of traffic before colliding with a concrete barrier at 65 miles per hour. The impact was catastrophic. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but Jennifer never regained consciousness. She was transported to Advocate Lutheran General Hospital in Park Ridge, where trauma surgeons fought to save her life. At 7:42 that morning, Jennifer Caroline Hayes was pronounced dead. She was 52 years old. The emergency room staff followed standard protocol, searching Jennifer's belongings for identification and emergency contacts. What they discovered in her purse created immediate confusion. Jennifer carried 2 driver's licenses, both valid, each issued in different states under slightly different names. Her phone, or rather, both phones found in her bag, contained multiple emergency contact entries. The hospital administrator made the decision to contact both individuals listed as her husband. The first call went to Michael Hayes in Chicago. He was getting ready for work when his phone rang, the unknown number triggering a sense of unease even before he answered. The words that followed shattered his world. There had been an accident. His wife was gone. He needed to come to the hospital immediately. Michael's legs gave out beneath him. Emma found him collapsed in the hallway, sobbing, unable to form coherent words. Simultaneously, 3,000 miles away in San Francisco, David Chen received an identical call. The time difference meant it was just before 5 in the morning on the West Coast. David initially thought it was a mistake, some cruel prank. Jennifer was supposed to arrive later that day. They had dinner reservations. Sophia's birthday cake was already ordered. The hospital representative insisted she had the correct information. David Chen was listed as the emergency contact for Jennifer Caroline Chen. She had been in a fatal accident. Could he please come identify the body? The next 48 hours unfolded in parallel confusion. Michael Hayes, devastated and operating on autopilot, began making funeral arrangements. He contacted Riverside Memorial Chapel, a funeral home his family had used for generations. He selected a casket, chose flowers, and began writing an obituary that described Jennifer as his beloved wife of 17 years, devoted mother to Emma and Lucas, and successful business consultant. The funeral was scheduled for March 12th at 2 in the afternoon. David Chen, equally destroyed by grief, made his own arrangements with the same funeral home, having found their information through an online search and appreciating their apparent availability on short notice. He described Jennifer as his wife of 14 years, loving mother to Ryan and Sophia, an accomplished professional. He also scheduled a service for March 12th, requesting an afternoon time slot that would allow family members traveling from out of state to attend. The funeral home's administrative assistant, processing what she assumed were two separate services, didn't immediately notice the discrepancy. It wasn't until the director, Jonathan Riverside, reviewed the week's schedule on the evening of March 11th that he noticed something impossible. Two different men had arranged services for two different women with nearly identical names, both killed in the same accident, both to be held at the same time the following day. Riverside pulled both files, comparing the details. The death certificate numbers matched. The hospital was the same. The date and time of death were identical. But the personal information provided by each family told completely different stories. He stared at the documents for several minutes, piecing together an explanation that seemed impossible yet unavoidable. These weren't two women. This was one woman with two families. Riverside had been in the funeral industry for 30 years. He had seen family drama, disputed wills, and shocking revelations. But he had never encountered anything like this. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly, and dialed Michael Hayes' number first. The conversation was brief and brutal. There was no gentle way to deliver the information. Another man had also arranged Jennifer's funeral. Another man claimed to be her husband. Another family claimed her as their own. Michael's immediate response was denial, then fury. This had to be a mistake, an administrative error, perhaps even fraud. But as Riverside provided details, dates that aligned with Jennifer's travel schedule, children's names, addresses, Michael's certainty began to crumble. The second call to David Chen produced similar reactions. Disbelief, anger, confusion, and slowly, horrifyingly, the dawning realization that the woman they loved had been living a lie. After 2 hours of emotional phone calls, both men reached an agonizing decision. They would proceed with a joint funeral service, not to honor Jennifer, but to uncover the complete truth of who she really was. Chapter 4. The Funeral Confrontation. March 12, 2019, brought an unseasonably cold morning to the Chicago area. Riverside Memorial Chapel, with its traditional architecture and somber atmosphere, had hosted thousands of funeral services over the decades. But nothing in the building's history compared to what unfolded that afternoon. Michael Hayes arrived first with Emma and Lucas, both teenagers moving through their grief in visible shock. Emma, 16 years old, held her younger brother's hand as they walked through the entrance. Lucas, 14, had barely spoken since learning of his mother's death. They took their seats in the front row on the left side of the chapel, a small group of relatives and close friends gathering behind them for support. 20 minutes later, David Chen entered through the same doors with Ryan and Sophia. Ryan was 13, tall for his age, with his father's features and his mother's eyes. Sophia, turning 11 that very day, wore a black dress that seemed too mature for her small frame. David guided his children to the front row on the right side of the chapel, mirroring the Hayes family's positioning. The two groups sat barely 15 feet apart, separated by the central aisle and an impossible truth neither fully comprehended. The chapel fell into an oppressive silence. Mourners from both families filled the pews, many confused by the unusual arrangement, whispers circulating about who these other people were and why two distinct groups claimed connection to the deceased. Jennifer's casket sat at the front, flowers arranged on both sides, a large photograph of her smiling face positioned prominently. In that image, she looked happy, carefree, with no hint of the deception she had maintained for nearly 2 decades. Jonathan Riverside, the funeral director, opened the service with carefully chosen words that acknowledged the extraordinary circumstances without providing details that might inflame emotions already running dangerously high. He spoke of Jennifer's professional accomplishments, her apparent dedication to family, and the complexity of human nature. His words hung in the air, doing little to ease the tension that crackled through the room like electricity before a storm. As the service progressed, awkward moments multiplied. When Riverside invited family members to share memories, Emma stood first, speaking through tears about her mother's bedtime stories and how she never missed a school event despite her demanding travel schedule. Minutes later, Sophia stood, describing almost identical memories, bedtime rituals, constant presence at school functions, unwavering attention. The parallel experiences created an eerie echo effect that left everyone in the chapel deeply unsettled. The most striking moment occurred when Lucas and Ryan accidentally made eye contact across the aisle. Something in their faces, the shape of their eyes, the curve of their mouths, revealed an undeniable genetic connection. They were brothers, half-brothers, and the recognition passed between them without words. Neither looked away immediately. Instead, they studied each other with a mixture of curiosity, confusion, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Following the service, both families gathered separately in different reception rooms. But curiosity and a need for answers eventually drew them together. Michael and David met in a private office, their conversation painful but necessary. They compared photographs, travel schedules, and the stories Jennifer had told each of them. The puzzle pieces aligned with devastating precision. Every business trip Michael thought Jennifer took to California had actually been time with her second family. Every Midwest consulting project David believed kept Jennifer away had been her life in Chicago. The discoveries continued in the days following the funeral. Jennifer's storage unit, found through bank statements, contained a treasure trove of documentation that revealed the full scope of her deception. There were duplicate photo albums showing parallel birthday parties celebrated weeks apart, the same children's milestones captured in different locations. Vacation photographs showed Jennifer had taken both families to similar destinations, beaches, national parks, theme parks, experiencing joy with each while keeping them completely separate. Most revealing were Jennifer's personal journals, discovered in a locked box. Page after page detailed her internal justifications, her fears, and her motivations. She wrote about loving both men in different ways, about her inability to choose, about her belief that she could provide complete love and attention to both families despite the fundamental dishonesty. She expressed guilt but also defiance, claiming she had harmed no one as long as the secret remained hidden. The journals revealed a woman who understood the wrongness of her actions, yet felt entitled to the life she had constructed. The legal complications were substantial. Jennifer's estate had to be divided between two families with competing claims. Attorneys worked through complex questions about asset distribution, life insurance beneficiaries, and property ownership. The process was contentious, expensive, and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. Yet something unexpected emerged from the wreckage of Jennifer's deception. The four children, Emma, Lucas, Ryan, and Sophia, began forming tentative connections. They exchanged messages, curious about each other, processing their shared trauma of discovering their mother had been someone entirely different for what they believed. Within months, they started meeting, building relationships that existed independently of their parents' complicated feelings. They were siblings, bound by genetics and circumstance, and they chose to honor that connection despite everything. Jennifer's funeral had exposed a secret that shattered two families. But in the aftermath, something fragile and genuine began to grow from the ruins she left behind. If this story left you speechless, hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking true crime stories. What would you do if you discovered this at a funeral? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.